vast universe, beautiful Earth, the dream of a peaceful, ideal world. This is the long-cherished dream of God and humanity. In the shoes of a servant, with the heart of the parents, shedding sweat for earth, tears for humanity, and blood for heaven. The man who has spent his entire life for God's homeland, Reverend Myung. Reverend Moon is now revered as the true parent to humanity, the savior to the world, the king of peace of the cosmos, and the model saint before heaven.
Without him, there would be no Washington Times, and I think it's appropriate that we pay our respects to him.
I respect Reverend Moon with all my heart. I wish for God's will to be fulfilled.
The activity of Reverend Moon is very important.
I think that Father and Mrs. Moon stands as a great example of the unity of the family.
16세의 범으로 천명을 받고 출발했던 하늘길이었습니다. 해고해보면 본인의 삶은 참으로 외롭고 고독한 외길의 일생이었음을 고백하지 아니할 수 없습니다.
Ten months after the 3.1 Korean independence movement, Reverend Moon was born in Jeongju of Pyongan, Bokdo on January 6, 1920. Reverend Moon was a boy full of curiosity. He befriended nature, spending his days roaming the mountains and rivers. He was also quite mature, always thinking of others before himself.
고기를 잡으러 가면 고이 구멍에 수구먹질 해가지고 뱀장굴 가서 입에다 물고 나오곤 했죠. 손을 잡 매끈매끈 해서 못 잡는데. 근데 우리 오빠가 지지 세낭 차렸단 말이야. 이게 바디가락에다가 쟤는 이게 고기 다가가지고 한무살이 쥐질 잡아가지고 고선 허세나 너 이거 먹어라. 그래서 잘 먹으시오.
However, the nation was groaning in misery under the Japanese rule. His hometown, Jeongju, was on the path of refugees running toward Manchuria. Reverend Moon's family was renowned for giving charity to those in need. His great-grandfather even left a saying, "If you feed people from all over the nation, the blessings of the nation will come to you." And thus, Reverend Moon's house became a place where the refugees tired from their journey could stop to eat food and rest. Having been raised with this kind of family tradition, from his early childhood, Reverend Moon couldn't ignore other people's pain and suffering. He often gave sacks of his family's rice to the refugees passing by his home. He understood that he needed new knowledge in order to reclaim the nation. And so he entered Osan School and transferred the following year to Jeongju Public School. Influenced by his grandfather, Myung, who was a pastor and also an independence activist, Reverend Moon's love for religion and his country grew.
At the age of 16, young Reverend Moon lost 5 of his 13 siblings. Grieving the death of his siblings and friends, and for the suffering of the nation, the young boy at 16 years of age went up a mountain alone to seek answers from God. On the dawn of Easter morning in 1935, the boy who prayed in tears all night long met Jesus in spirit. When I doubt people, I feel pain. When I judge people, it is unbearable. When I hate people, there is no value to my existence. But when I loved those who acted against me, I brought victory. If you have loved as I have, I will give you the crown of glory. His determination on this day to accomplish God's will became the force that drove him for his entire life. The young Reverend Moon became a completely different person after that Easter morning. He spoke less and spent more time in deep contemplation. When he turned 18 in 1938, he went to Huksukdong in Seoul. Homestay in an unfamiliar land, far away from his hometown for the first time. He entered Gyeongsang Commercial School with a major in electricity, which was the cutting-edge field of study at the time.
요만이가 그저 우리 오빠 공부 실력에 고생 많이 했지요. 그저 눈에 채가지고 맹디 나가지고 우리 어머니 밤낮 차도 못하고 그저 배 짜누라고 그래. 그때 쌀한 마리 이혼시갈지예요. 올사금이 한 달에 10원이 없게 됐죠. 그때 그러니까 10원이 큰 돈이디요 뭐.
그렇죠.
우리 어머니 어찌나 고생 많이 했는지 몰라요. 오빠를 오셔서 우리 어머니가 나 때문에 고생 많이 했다고.
Going to school on weekdays and to church on the weekends, he sought out the will of heaven and fundamental principles of the universe. His Bible worn to tatters from his study, and his tears from deep prayers soaked the floor. He cried because the pain and sorrow of God and Jesus touched his heart. In 1941, Reverend Moon went to Japan for further study. Thinking that learning about Japan thoroughly would help the liberation of his nation, he entered Waseda University and majored in electrical engineering. Apart from his studies, he voluntarily experienced the lowest kinds of life through working at a dockyard and experienced the highest standards of life by sometimes sleeping at luxurious hotels. In such ways, he trained himself vigorously. Under his motto, "One must govern himself before desiring the dominance of the universe," Reverend Moon worked to unite his mind and body. At the same time, he was very active in an underground independence organization created amongst Korean students.
제2의 3.1운동 어떤 걸 하려고 모임을 가졌었죠. 걔네들이요 얼마나 심한지 한국 사람인데 다니면 꽁무니를 떠야 돼요.
Reverend Moon constructed the main frame of Heaven's Word before the liberation. His preparation to soar through the sky was complete. However, because of his liberation activities, he was captured by the Japanese police. His bones were crushed, his flesh torn as he was tortured brutally. In 1945, the liberation finally came. The tragedy of losing what they once owned, having their children taken away to the Japanese army, the pain of oppression. The sorrow of Korean people during these 40 years was exactly what God had been going through. God, who was ripped of everything by Satan, chained by pain and sorrow for 6,000 years. The God Reverend Moon discovered was not the omnipotent God who casts judgment. God had excruciating sorrow, as he was unable to do anything but watch as his dream of heaven on earth shattered to pieces. It was the parent whose heart had been burnt black from losing his begotten son. God's sorrowful heart. Reverend Moon became determined to liberate God from Satan's shackles and put him back on his rightful throne. This was the promise he made with heaven. Reverend Moon's public life began. He was 26 years old. He began searching for spiritual Christian sects and worked to spread the will of God and the new truth. The joy of Korea's liberation was cut short. The nation was divided into North and South at the 38th parallel line. In 1946, when refugees journeyed south seeking freedom, Reverend Moon went up north, remaining obedient to heaven's command. People who were thirsting for heaven's new words of truth came to Reverend Moon, and his number of followers expanded rapidly. In 1946 and 1948, because of local Christian churches' slanders and the North Korean Communist regime's religious persecution, Reverend Moon was arrested twice and dragged to Daedong Security Office, being charged as being a spy from South Korea. Reverend Moon endures more gruesome torture. Even through his suffering and anguish, Reverend Moon endures the torture by lamenting for God all the pain he had to go through.
세숫대야에 피를 토해놨는데 이 토해인 건지 토했는데 핏덩어리가 둥둥 떴는데 한 세숫대야나 토했어요. 그런데 아버님이 이제는 세상 떠나기 직전이라고 그러니까 아버님도 말도 못하시고 가만 누워 계시는데 너무너무 불쌍하고 너무너무 비참해서 볼 수가 없었어요.
After 2.5 months of deadly torture, he was sent to a forced labor camp called Hungnam Fertilizer Factory, this time charged with disrupting the peace and order of society. It was back-breaking labor, starting at 4:30 in the morning to fill 1,300 bags of fertilizer in one day. The camp was a place of no return. Even in such a hellish environment, Reverend Moon shared his food with others and took care of his inmates, which gave him the title Prison Saint.
숟가루 같은 거 저는 이제 놀아먹질 않는 사람이 대부분인데 문 선생님은 그렇지 않고 아픈데 안찰 기도도 해주고 그냥 이 교회에 대한 진리 같은 것들 전파를 시켜주고 다른 사람하고는 좀 다르게 행동을 했습니다. 그러니까 이제 감옥 안하게 성자라고 그럴 수밖에 없는 게 아니겠어요.
On June 25, 1950, Reverend Moon was in the camp when the tragedy of the Korean people began. October 14th of the same year was the day he was to be executed. The North Korean army planned to retreat and began killing the inmates systematically. However, Hungnam's gates were opened due to the bombing of the United Nations forces. Reverend Moon left the camp with his new followers. It was 2 years, 8 months after being incarcerated.
"40 years later, on December 6, 1991, he talked about the peace of Korea with the very person who sought to kill him. Now, Reverend Moon gives financial support to charity and hosts cultural sports exchange more than any other religious organizations or business companies in South Korea. Reverend Moon's true love embraced even his enemy who tried to take his life. Just like the story of Jacob embracing his brother Esau with love in order to indemnify the sins of Cain and Abel, Reverend Moon used the same philosophy in interacting with North Korea. Reverend Moon visited his hometown in Jeongju. As he laid his eyes on his hometown, deep grief was filled his eyes. After meeting with his remaining family and laying flowers on his parents' graves, thoughts of true love being the only hope filled his being. Reverend Moon's foundation in North Korea blossomed through the Little Angels performance later in Pyongyang, and plays the role of acting as a hotline whenever there is tension between North and South Korea.
On December 4th, 1950, 40 days after he arrived in Pyongyang, he decided to head south. His body was battered after the long imprisonment and forced labor. But he made it out of North Korea even while carrying one of his followers on his back. After 2 months of traveling, Reverend Moon settled in Bumnekgol, Busan. On May 11th of the same year, Reverend Moon began writing The Divine Principle. The Divine Principle reveals the most fundamental principles of God, humanity, and the universe. It explains the entire providential process beginning from God's creation of humanity, their fall, and God's providence to restore them. On May 10th, 1952, when Reverend Moon was 33, the original Divine Principle was completed. It took 1 year to complete. On that day, a female missionary from a local church came to visit Reverend Moon in his mud hut. She came intending to convert Reverend Moon, but was converted by him instead.
오늘 이 땅에는 못 먹고 못 입고 못 사는 사람이 너무도 많습니다. 이 사람들 잘 먹고 잘 입고 잘 살 수 있는 천국을 이 땅 위에 참 건설하겠습니다 하는, 그런데 막 목이 메어 절 줄 몰라요. 그때에 저는 뭘 느꼈는가 하면은, 하나님께서는 들으시고 다 응낙해 주실 것이다, 이런 생각을 하면서 기도의 감명을 많이 받았어요.
In 1954, the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity was founded in Pukakdong, Songdong-gu, Seoul. Reverend Moon had sought out Christian churches, but they only persecuted him for their misunderstanding. Because of their disbelief of the prepared foundation, he had to start anew, putting new wine in new wineskins. He had to make a new beginning to pioneer a new heaven, new earth, and new age. Reverend Moon's words spread like wildfire in the universities. Especially 2 mission schools, Yonsei and Iwa Women's University, were at the center of this whirlwind. Why couldn't the omnipotent God prevent the fall of man and all the misery throughout history? Was Jesus destined to be crucified? When, where, and how will the Lord come? The headquarters church at Cheongpadong, which was then called Seoul Church, was crowded with people who came with these kinds of questions. Reverend Moon would speak with such fervor that his clothes would be drenched with sweat and cried tears of blood as he prayed and so the congregation would break out in wailing. The Seoul church was nicknamed the Wailing Church. As its influence expanded, the persecution by the Christian church became greater, and even the media started accusing the Unification Church of being a cult.
그 당시에 국회의장을 지내고 있던 이기붕 씨의 부인이 이화대학교 부총장 박마리아 씨였어요. 그러니까는 신문이 그냥 며칠 후에 후딱 바뀌어버렸어. 우리를 갖다 음란한 집단이다, 벌거벗고 춤을 춘다, 가정을 파괴하는 집단이다, 이렇게 돼가지고 사회에 나쁜 여론이 퍼지기 시작했던 것입니다.
July 4th, 1955. Reverend Moon was incarcerated on the charges of evading the military draft and destroying families. Overflowing with love for humanity, he did not blame or hate anyone. He was released as innocent 3 months later. However, the rumors made up at this time are still being used by Christians as though they were facts. God's providence was harmed, and Reverend Moon took the most critical damage, but he did not make any excuses. Truth prevails in the end. As to stand as a proof to this statement, the church continued to expand greatly.
Enlightened theologians recognized the value of the divine principle at first sight. Christian Academy House Debate. Yonsei University's professor of theology, Nam Dong-so, highly praised the divine principle as the most excellent systematic theology in Korea.
The divine principle, in definition, is not a creed of one sect. It is the path of heaven, encompassing the righteous way of heaven, earth, and humans. Therefore, it can be applied anywhere. Knowing the heart of God and Jesus better than anyone else, Reverend Moon has stood in the vanguard of religious reconciliation. In December 2003, leaders from different sects of religions gathered in Israel to coronate Jesus as the King of the Jews. What had seemed impossible was accomplished. Reverend Moon's spirit of religious harmony has been inherited and developed by his children. Not only Christian pastors, but monks from Buddhist sects, including the Dalai Lama, and Islam imams, are joining hands together.
In 1960, Reverend Moon was 40 years old. His holy marriage was held in Cheongpa-dong, Seoul. The groom of heaven who found the principle through tears, shedding blood, in order to indemnify the providence of restoration all alone, and now standing victorious. The bride of the earth more pure and beautiful than white lilies, answering the call of heaven. The dream that was never realized since the fall. the joyous day of the relief of heaven's sorrowful heart, the realization of humanity's greatest dream. From this day, Reverend and Mrs. Moon began to walk the path of the true parents, true teachers, and true owners. 7 years after the holy marriage, the two created the model of true peace and heaven on earth. This period was a model course to create the ideal true family that serves God and humanity through the heavenly lineage severed from fallen nature. Reverend and Mrs. Moon set the standard of the true family and then strived to go beyond race, nation, and reach the world. Reverend and Mrs. Moon extended this 7-year model of the public course from the individual level to family, tribe, race, nation, world, all the way to the cosmic level, restoring God's lineage and His original status. Korea was an extremely poor nation in the 60s, with a per capita income of $100. Reverend Moon started an enlightenment program in rural areas together with witnessing efforts of his followers. This eventually led the nation to begin the new community movement. Japan was the first world stage pioneered to spread the words of heaven. Reverend Moon visited Japan 6 years after 1959 when it was first pioneered. He prayed for Japan and led the young people to the path of heaven. The Japanese members risked their lives to spread the principle to university students affiliated with North Korea. Today, Japanese members are the greatest in number in the Unification Church and play an important role in worldwide witnessing. All this would have been impossible if Reverend Moon had not poured so much love into the nation that brought him near to death during the colonization. From the 70s, witnessing in America started upon the foundation created in Korea and Japan. In the early 70s, America was moaning in serious sickness. Young people wandered around without any vision, intoxicated and soiled with drugs and free sex. In the winter of 1971, Reverend Moon left for America. The eccentric pastor from the East began spreading the message of heaven while touring around the nation. After a while, Reverend Moon became an icon for the spiritual revolution of the American society.
May I present the Reverend Myung Moon. 최근 미국이 국제식량한 땅에 떨어지고 의역은 죄악의 도상이요 악마의 거치로 화해가고 있습니다. 대국 전역에 이와 같이 사탄이 조인이 될 때 하나님은 외면하실 수밖에 없고 급기야 미국을 떠나실 수밖에 없게 될 것입니다. 지금이 바로 그런 때인 것을 똑똑히 알아야 합니다.
Leaders were the first to listen. Rekindling the founding spirit of America, Reverend Moon attracted more attention after he was invited to speak at the House of Representatives. $300,000 people gathered at the Washington Monument Assembly.
무엇보다도 무신론에 입각한 공산주의의 위협은 가장 심각하며 이 시간에도 도처에서 침식에 들어오고 있습니다. 이것은 단지 미국만의 문제가 아니고 하나님께 있어 그리고 모든 종교인과 온 자유세계인들에게 있어 심각하고도 절박한 문제입니다. 하나님께서 200년간 준비하신 미국은 크게 각성하고 하나님께서 분부하신 중차대한 세계적 사명을 다하여야 할 것입니다.
Various young people of transcending religious sects gathered. Americans were now excited about the teachings of Reverend Moon. However, pain and suffering found true parents again in America. Worried about the fast-growing influence of the church, racists and communist sympathizers joined in force to persecute Reverend Moon. They came up with the tax issue. Funds for witnessing work were not taxed in America, which was a Christian nation. However, America had closed its heart. Consequently, Reverend Moon was imprisoned in Danbury. After the Japanese rule, North Korea's communist regime, and South Korea's Christian regime, innocent Reverend Moon was imprisoned for the 6th time.
그리스도와 기독교가 이 나머진 세계가 하나 될 줄 믿고 감옥에서 하나 못 되는 이 무리들을 하나 만들려가는 내 테리토리는 우리의 영토인데 영토에 사는 사람을 새로이 하나 만들 운동을 위해 간다는 것을 알아요.
Mrs. Moon's grief was greater than anyone's.
1984년 7월 20일은 정말로 빼서 없애버리고 싶은 날이기도 했습니다. 감옥까지 해방하러 가신다고 당신을 위해서 울지 말고 뜻이 성사되는 걸 위해서 기도하라는 말씀을 누누이 하셨지만 왠지 그런 말을 듣게 될 때에 나도 어떻게 억제할 수 없는 소름이 폭받쳤습니다.
Reverend Moon's imprisonment served as the catalyst of a massive movement for religious freedom. The tribulation of Danbury united the American society, especially the Christians, who were divided into many different sects. President Barack Obama's mentor, Reverend Joseph Lowry, stood in the forefront of the religious community demanding religious freedom.
What I do understand is that I'm not secure until his rights are secure. And Falwell is not secure until Lowry is secure. None of us is secure until all of us are secure.
Reverend Moon washed dishes and cleaned his place in the day and read at night. At 3 in the morning, he woke up to pray for forgiveness for the situation and prayed for the end of the Cold War and for world peace. One month before his release, he directed prominent scholars to proclaim the end of communism in Switzerland. In order to end the Cold War, he used the Washington Times to play a critical role in establishing the Star Wars policy and created the public opinion which helped prevent the spread of communism in Central and South America.
Together we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. And, oh yes, we won the Cold War.
Reverend Moon was recognized for his efforts to end the Cold War and fight for religious freedom. In this period, Reverend and Mrs. Moon received 4 honorary doctorates. Reverend Moon was finally released after 1 year and 3 months of incarceration. The wrongful imprisonment helped the Unification Church to create a more solid foundation, hastened the end of the Cold War, and promoted religious alliance. These miracles happened during his time in Danbury. Afterwards, the expansion of the Unification Church went beyond America and reached every corner of the globe. Now, Reverend Moon's thoughts and words are spread across 195 nations in all continents. The Church overcame the tribulations of martyrs in communist nations, being imprisoned by other religions. The foundation for the victory was none other than Reverend Moon's ceaseless sincerity and support.
In 1990, the biggest event in the 20th century happened. It was the fall of communism. On April 11, 1991, Reverend Moon met with Soviet Union President Gorbachev.
I must have forgotten about it during the times of perestroika.
The meeting was held in a lively and friendly mood. Reverend Moon supported Gorbachev, who was working to bring revolution and reformation at the time.
지금 큰 세계적인 이 가정을 짓고 있는데 장래에서 영내에서 다 누구나.
The two leaders earnestly discussed about economic cooperation between Korea and the Soviet Union, and also about the peaceful unification of the Korean peninsula. This hastened the end of the Cold War. Later, Gorbachev visited Reverend and Mrs. Moon in Korea. The smiles on the leaders who put an end to the tragedy of the 20th century were bright.
After the liberation, the Korean peninsula was dominated by the ideological battle of left and right. Untouched by the warm breeze of détente, the relationship of North and South Korea is still ice cold. In 1968, Reverend Moon created the International Federation for Victory over Communism. The International Federation's goal was to research, criticize, and overcome communist theory and system, and realize the true ideal of mutual living, prosperity, and righteousness. In 1975, as communism expanded rapidly after the defeat of Vietnam War, blue-eyed foreigners shouting in the streets to save the nation could be seen all over the country. These foreigners were the members of the Unification Church who came from all over the world to participate in the movement. This movement against communism reached its peak in 1975, when 1 million people gathered at the Save the Nation rally held in Yeouido.
하나님이 있다 하는 세계는 하나님 편이요, 하나님이 없다 하고 하는 세계는 사탄과 악마의 세계입니다. 이 두 세계가 부딪힐 때 그 결과는 하나님의 전망을 결정하는 것입니다. 그러므로 공산주의를 쓰러뜨리는 이 싸움은 곧 하나님의 싸움이 되는 것입니다.
In 1980, the International Federation for Victory over Communism movement in Korea developed into a unification movement centering on true love. In 1994, especially when North Korea's Yongbyon nuclear crisis was at its peak, students from both Koreas gathered to discuss reconciliation in Beijing, China. Under the slogan, "Love is thicker than blood," Reverend Moon created a turning point for the unification movement. At the international level, the movement developed into Causa. Causa was a Godism movement with the goal of supporting South America's anti-communism movement. At the time of President Carter, the communization of the world reached its peak. Reverend Moon played a critical role in helping Reagan become president by defeating Carter, the favored candidate.
이 많은 사진에다가 레이간 파격적 승리, 레이간, 그리고 그 위에다가 이게 뉴스월드의 예언이다. 이걸 가지고 레이간 앞에 가져갔지. 선거에 난 아침에. 벌써 레이간이 이기겠구나 하는 그 심리를 전 국민에게 심어준 거예요. 그게 이제 문 총재님의 기발한 대통령 선거 성공하는 작전이셨습니다. 전략이 있었어요.
Washington, D.C., America's heart of politics. Reverend Moon founded the Washington Times in 1982 to correct the public opinion that had been heavily influenced by the left wing. The newspaper gave great influence and strength to the White House all the way till the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s.
From the start, the Washington Times was not shy about challenging the more established media outlets. Freedom prevailed in the Cold War, without a shot being fired, I might add.
In difficult times, even more than in easy ones, The voice of conservatism must make itself heard in the media.
Reverend Moon worried more about the world after the end of the Cold War. Can we go beyond the walls of national boundaries, race, culture, and religion, and create a world of perpetual peace and happiness? The question all religions seek for an answer. Reverend Moon proposes International Blessing Marriage Ceremony as the answer. Reverend Moon teaches that through the blessing, humanity can be rid of original sin, be connected to the heavenly divine lineage, and after removing fallen nature through the path of indemnity, we will find the kingdom of God and His righteousness. The blessing marriage ceremony, which started in 1960 with 3 couples, increased into hundreds of millions of couples in just 40 years. Finally, on January 27, 2001, the World Peace Blessing Ceremony was held at the New York UN headquarters. Blacks with whites, wealthy and poor, Japanese and Koreans, Jews and Christians giving their vows. The intercultural, inter-exchange, international blessing marriage ceremony is no longer a unification church ritual. This is receiving attention as the fundamental solution to realize the ideal of one world family under one God. This blessing ceremony has expanded as a movement to recover the family, transcending race, religion, theology, and culture. The United Nations, often dubbed as the world government, though stating to arbitrate the interests of 195 member nations, unceasing sharp conflict between these nations remains so that the UN can hardly work to fulfill its original function. Reverend Moon aims to revolutionize the social system through NGOs and the UN, centering on the blessings of families. The UN's gate was first opened through Mrs. Moon. She proclaimed the dawning of the Age of Women in 1992 and founded the Women's Federation for World Peace and began to renew the UN. Many speeches at the UN followed. In 2000, Reverend and Mrs. Moon spoke together, calling for the renewal of the UN. In 2011, at the UN headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, Mrs. Moon conveyed the message of peace to every nation in the world. Reverend Moon's main goal for the renewal of the UN is to implement the system of Senate and representatives. In order to hasten the renewal of the UN, Reverend Moon founded the Universal Peace Federation. Transcending the profit of one's own nation, in order to create a solution for world peace, Reverend Moon mobilized his entire foundation for world peace. The original UN is called the Cain UN, and this new organization is called the Able UN. Current and former national leaders from all over the world who support Reverend Moon's peace initiative are participating in large numbers under the title of Peace Ambassador. President Jonathan Goodluck, who became President of Nigeria in July 2000, has been actively participating in Reverend Moon's World Peace Movement as a peace ambassador. After the inauguration, the President Goodluck invited Reverend and Mrs. Moon and hosted a Universal Peace Federation rally. It was to find a solution for the country's racial conflict and for the revival of Africa.
One family under God. All UPF activities are aligned with this one vision, and its foundation is spread all across the world. International NGOs created by Reverend Moon are active in many fields. The UPF is working internationally for the renewal of the UN and nationally for the education of peace ambassadors and the unification movement. Along with the Women's Federation for World Peace, which is opening a new horizon for a new women's movement as an UN NGO, other NGOs consisting of students and other volunteers are striving to create a better world. True peace begins from spiritual healing. Heaven and Earth Training Center, where you can experience training and meditation centering on unification principle. Reverend Moon is working hard to lead not just Christians, but representatives from all major religions to overcome their differences and work together for the unity of humanity. The foundation for the equalization of technology is being laid in both industrial and economic fields to create a mutually prosperous world. All fields from medicine, beverages, machinery, construction, shipbuilding, and even leisure tourism. Reverend Moon gives special attention and much investment into the ocean industry and aviation industry in order to solve world hunger and to prepare for the space age. Media outlets in Korea, Japan, and America are providing fast and accurate information and leading the formation of a righteous public opinion. Raising global leaders with international minds who show love for heaven, human, and the nation. Schools from preschool to graduate schools are in operation in Korea and America. Here, the gate to the world of learning and truth is open. Culture, art, and sports which transcend all barriers. The Little Angels and Universal Ballet make the world beautiful through Korea's traditional dances, songs, and heavenly art. Martial arts combining East and West. Songnam Ilhwa, the top soccer team in Asia, and the world-level international soccer tournament, the Peace Cup. Reverend Moon is creating the world centering on the culture of heart, which transcends all national boundaries.
Reverend Moon also greatly influenced Korea's automobile and electronics industry. In 1980, he brought automobile parts manufacturing technologies from Germany to Korea. And in 1988, he bought Japan's Wacom Electronics and led the development of Korea's electronics industry. After the mid-90s, Reverend Moon expanded to South America. In 1997, at age 77, Reverend Moon explored the rainforest of the Amazon and pioneered the path humanity will tread in the new millennium. Pantanal, Brazil still contains the wonders of ancient nature. Here, Reverend Moon is educating the community culture of a peaceful world and is preparing the foundation for the leisure industry of the future. There is another place where Reverend Moon has been paying much attention from the year 2008. That place is known as today's Sodom and Gomorrah, the Sin City, Las Vegas. Reverend Moon has been investing his time and money to turn Las Vegas from Sin City to Sun City. This is because he knows God's heart, which yearns to save every last soul in the deepest depth of hell. Furthermore, he is attracting the attention of the world with the Bering Strait project, under operation along with the Korea-Japan undersea tunnel, which are both being worked on. The nations concerned are discreetly discussing the matter. The project, which is called the World Peace King Bridge and Tunnel, will connect Russia and America, and it symbolizes the effort to destroy the barriers made by Satan. Tongil Group exists to support this ideal. Reverend Moon's countless international activities of various different fields have one main purpose. This is to tear down all barriers and realize God's ideal of creating one family under God.
And so, in effect, the Unification Church will be the church which inherits the foundation of Christ to complete the work which Christ started. And so the Tongil Foundation is playing the supporting role to that. It will support the church, the Unification Church, and its growth and its development so that it can reach the point where it can really inherit the foundation of Christianity worldwide.
Reverend Moon hosted innumerable rallies proclaiming God's message. His words changed individuals, renewed societies, and serve as the driving force behind the changes of nations. Mrs. Moon, who silently helped him from behind and started standing beside him from 1992 and accompanied him in more than 1,000 international speaking tours. When Mrs. Moon was on international speaking tours, Reverend Moon congratulated her on the victories through conference calls.
Congratulations to you, congratulations to parents.
Open mouth, job, 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 job.
From the wilderness of Africa to the UN headquarters, Reverend Moon went to all corners of the earth. Despite any dangers of South American mountain sicknesses or African endemic disease, he brought the words of heaven to the ends of the earth.
Reverend Moon has lived by God's words his entire life. His will can be seen through his calligraphies. All the calligraphies written on the first of every year from 1916. The calligraphies written at offering ceremonies for events of buildings and monuments and such give us a glimpse of Reverend Moon's heart and philosophy. In each stroke and letter is his unchanging determination for the completion of God's will and his sincere hopes to restore God's homeland. Begins at early dawn, 5 a.m. morning, Hundake, started in 1997, and has become the tradition of Unification Church. Reverend Moon treats all people with the same love, whether they may be one person or thousands, young or old. He normally speaks for 3 to 4 hours, sometimes 12 hours. He has even spoken for more than 20 hours at times. His disciples remain seated without eating anything. Reverend Moon speaks to his children with all his energy. Sometimes he tells others to stand up and share their stories or sing. Even after 12 hours, Reverend Moon continues without paying attention to the passage of time, his voice trembling with concern.
The collection of his speeches has already exceeded 500 volumes. If we combine all the different types of his books, there are more than 1,000 books. God's will is in his every word. His every sentence contains God's ideal for creation, humans' fall, Jesus' life course, and the tears of blood that had to be shed for the providence of restoration. When reading Reverend Moon's words, one cannot help but cry when coming to understand the sorrow and pain of heaven.
여러분 모두는 참 부모님의 대신자, 상속자들이 되시고 생애의 필승을 기록한 자서전과 실적, 베푸신 말씀 이 모든 것을 상속하여 여러분의 생애에도 참 부모님과 같이 기필코 승리하시기를 기원하는 바입니다. 그래야 참 부모님의 탄생한 한국이 하나님의 족과 고향으로 완성완결 완료되는 것입니다.
The words of truth make our character mature, and a life of true love makes us holy. Reverend Moon's words are the path, the truth, and the life. These words are our textbook from which we must learn. In March 2004, an amazing event took place at the U.S. Capitol building. Along with major religious leaders, UN ambassadors from many nations, and U.S. congressmen, and many world leaders of different fields crowned Reverend and Mrs. Moon as the Peace King. Reverend Moon's life and works, despite all the persecution, moves the hearts of the righteous. The crown of glory was offered to God. Under the title of Peace King, Reverend Moon held coronation ceremonies in Korea and America in January 2009. This was the day the pain of 6,000 years due to the human fall was relieved, and the day the sovereignty stolen by Satan was reclaimed back to God's side. The promise he made with heaven at 16 was finally fulfilled at age 90.
아버님, 제일 소중한 한자 뭡니까? 한번 물어봤습니다. 그러니까 아버님께서 수만 한자 중에 이제 한순간에 그냥 딱 한 한자 쓰셨는데 그거는 바로 정성성자였습니다. 정성성자. 말씀은 이룰 성. 그러니까 말씀을 이루어야 된다. 이런 사람 되어야 된다. 아버님께서 정말로 말씀을 이루어주셨던 분입니다. 하고 평생 동안에 정성으로 사셨던 분이에요. 하나님 위한 정성, 세계 위한 정성, 평화 위한 정성, 사랑 위한 정성. 이런 정성 들이시면서 사셨던 분이에요.
Walking the way of the will was a thorny path of tribulations. The biggest tragedy was sending their 5 children to heaven. Adding to the sadness of losing 5 of his family members when he was a young boy, his pain multiplied. Is there more indemnity left to be paid, which required the life of my firstborn son? His life more precious than my own. Though we know about the spirit world, the bearing of each child is unbearable, tearing my heart to pieces. However, Reverend and Mrs. Moon held their tears back for God and for the Providence, even when they wanted to cry their hearts out. Reverend Moon himself came close to death 7 times. He often traveled by airplane to spread the words of heaven quickly to as many places and people as possible. He almost died 6 times in prisons, and the last time was by helicopter. This unexpected accident was reported through the world on July 19, 2008.
오늘 빗속에서 통일교의 문선용 총재가 탄 헬기가 경기도의 한
While he was flying to Chongpyeong, his private helicopter crashed and exploded. Shortly afterwards, however, all 16 passengers evacuated safely. People called this a miracle. Heaven protected them from Satan's last attack. Reverend Moon told his feelings about the incident to 3 of his grandchildren.
얘들이 왕오빠 왕엄마 왕엄마 찬 3말을 듣고 선생님이 나는 얘들 죽을까봐 말이야 17분 이내에 일어나서 배르고 도망 못 가면 없어진다고 알았어. 17분 이내에. 꿈 같은 얘기야.
The ocean has a special place in Reverend Moon's heart. Whether in rain or snow, even when the waves raged, he always spent time in the ocean. On days without great events, he would frequently go out to the ocean. Through fishing, he understood the heart of heaven and set plans for the providence. The ocean and fishing was another form of prayer and devotion. He spent his days with heaven in one hand, the earth in the other, seeking to correct the course of history. Trotting through the mud while bearing the burden of history on his back. His days of pioneering the path of heaven, which God and humanity have long awaited, living strictly in line with heavenly principles every moment of the day.
Six times of wrongful imprisonment and numerous persecutions, even sacrificing his flesh and blood to heaven, shattering his heart to pieces. His determination to bring about the liberation of God and the salvation of humanity became steadfast while out on the ocean. Remaining ever silent, the ocean consoled Reverend Moon's heart. It helped him overcome all the suffering. The ocean has been his lifelong partner and the representative of heaven, helping hope spring up like a fountain.
두 마리.
두 마리?
두 마리.
어머, 어떡해. 두 마리, 네트.
오케이.
Now, bases for oceanic operations are established all around the world. They are founded in order to solve problems of world hunger and the energy crisis through the ocean. Reverend Moon also invented the resin molding method and created a leisure boat to hasten the dawn of the age of ocean leisure.
The path of restoration filled with tears of blood, his cheerful spirit helped to endure the hardships. He sings and dances when he is happy, anywhere and anytime. He enjoys songs that sing of love for the homeland and country. Just as songs and dances transcend barriers and connect people's hearts together, he sincerely wishes that humanity will become one. The new heaven, the new earth, and the new age have dawned. The painful past of striving to achieve the will of heaven on this earth now shines as the beacon for the new millennium. Liberating God from his inexpressible agony, which was so deep and vast that even if the sky was paper and the ocean was ink, you could not record it all. Not much time is left now until the foundation day of God's homeland, Chanilgu. There will be no more sins, no more tears. A place overflowing with peace, freedom, happiness, and true love. In order to establish his kingdom and its righteousness, Reverend Moon continues to march forward mightily on the path of the true parents of humanity, the true teacher of history, and the peace king of God's homeland.